Dear Maryanne, I found the first paragraph of your eighth letter, Building a Biliterate Brain, to be particularly interesting and maybe a little jarring. As you state, I have little doubt that the next generation will go beyond us in ways we cannot imagine at this moment. You go on to cite Alec Ross's assertion from his 2016 book, The Industries of the Future, that 65% of the jobs our present preschoolers will hold in the future haven't even been invented yet. Given the world that will exist in the not so distant future, it is obviously incumbent on us to acknowledge what we don't know and at the same time support research and efforts to accommodate the cognitive development our children will need to enter a future in which they can be productive and make meaningful contributions. It seems like we're building the airplane while it's in the air, a pretty tricky thing to do at the very least. However, you do provide a framework for us to consider that is particularly relevant in this time in history. You write, knowledge about the reading brain and the directions of its future iterations requires yoking research from multiple disciplines, from cognitive neuroscience and technology to the humanities and social sciences. This is essential. Cognitive psychologist and author of Enlightenment Now: The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress, Steven Pinker, pointed out that merely increasing knowledge is not enough to bring about progress. Science can bring us innumerable benefits in knowledge building on any number of fronts. However, human flourishing, that is, life, health, happiness, freedom, knowledge, love, and richness of experience, all the things that we want for our children and all humans who share our planet, depends on the humanities and social sciences. And equipping our current and future generations to flourish means that we need to find a way to facilitate the development of what you refer to as a biliterate brain. This means that we assist our young readers to become expert, flexible code switchers between print and digital mediums, now and later, between and among the multiple future communication mediums. For teachers of young students, it means that we need to conceptualize initial development as learners within two distinct domains with regard to the different mediums. In other words, we need to attend to their reading brains with regard to the cognitive processes that facilitate their ability to read printed texts as a distinct domain. And at the same time, we need to co develop their ability to engage in digital mediums. By envisioning these two distinct domains in the early years and developing these skills until they are well developed and internalized, children can, as you write, learn from the outset that each medium has its own rules and useful characteristics, which include its own best purposes, pace, and rhythms. This is akin to teaching dual language learners who are able to code switch effectively between two languages. As you wrote in your sixth letter, in the early years of school, physical three-dimensional books would be the primary medium for learning to read. Reading to and with children not only reinforces initial understanding of the role of phonemic awareness and phonics as foundational reading skills, but it also reinforces social and emotional interaction. And through questions about the text, creates connections to background knowledge, elicits empathy for others' experiences and lives, and prompts the ability of children to draw inferences and express their own analyses, reflections, and insights. Early experiences with deep reading processes slows children down so that they can think and ponder the words, the ideas, and the stories. We cannot minimize the importance of books in learning to read, learn, and navigate the world. You also point out the importance of writing in the early years of learning to read. I often refer to the importance of writing as a crucial component of early reading instruction. I often describe the reciprocal relationship between reading and writing as being like the reciprocal relationship between the skills associated with addition and subtraction. We teach children to add two numbers together to get a correct solution. For example, 3 plus 2 equals 5. However, we also teach a subtraction equation that can serve as a check for the accuracy of the addition equation, so that we see that 5 minus 3 equals 2. I suggest that writing serves the same function in literacy teaching and learning. A teacher can teach a child to read a sentence correctly. However, if a teacher wants to check a student's understanding of phonemic and phonetic skills and the foundational skills of reading and writing, that can be accomplished very efficiently and effectively by asking the student to write a simple sentence. But not only is this a very natural way of assessing students' literacy development, it also nurtures students' ability to create and communicate meaning through expression. It emboldens their literacy development by teaching them if they think something, they can say it. And if they say it, they can write it. And if they write it, they can read it. Importantly, I think this type of literacy development cannot be effective through a digital medium or on a screen. It works best with paper and pencil because it does involve the senses. As a teacher of young children, I always kept a center or a station with a variety of writing materials: notepads, recycled paper, construction paper, cut up brown grocery bags, even leftover gift wrapping from birthdays and holidays. I kept pencils, pens, and markers of any kind and shape. The writing my students produced in kindergarten would transform from scribbles and lines, which I would encourage them to read to me, to words even I could read, and on to sentences and even stories that they would read and share with each other. Teaching with books and printed text, generally considered the traditional medium of literacy teaching and learning, should obviously remain a constant in early childhood classrooms. However, in order to create students with biliterate brains means we also have to teach the processes of digital mediums. And this requires thoughtful research and innovation as we move into the future. I am intrigued by the research of Marina Bears at Tufts University. I love the idea of a digital playground in the classroom. Some schools have incorporated maker spaces in classrooms that enable students to create and explore designs with various materials. A digital playground could operate in much the same way, providing time and space for students to explore various aspects of technology, from making graphic art to programming Lego robots to create GarageBand compositions. Introducing students to the processes of coding and programming will provide new venues of learning that strengthen the deductive, inductive, and analogical skills that are used across all STEM areas as essential components of the scientific method. Coding will most definitely be an essential and valued skill for many, many workers in the future. Your quote from Mitchell Resnick and Marina Bears sums up the importance of coding skills beginning in the early years when they state that every child should be given the opportunity to learn how to code. Coding is often seen as difficult or exclusive, but we see it as a new type of literacy, a skill that should be accessible for everyone. Coding helps learners to organize their thinking and express their ideas just as writing does. As young children code, they learn how to create and express themselves with the computer rather than just interact with software created by others. Children learn to think sequentially explore cause and effect, and develop design and problem solving skills. At the same time, they aren't just learning to code, they are coding to learn. Interestingly, in a recent graduate class, I asked my students what their own elementary, middle, and high school students talked about when considering their future lives as adults. In other words, what they want to be when they grow up. I was surprised how many reported that their students wanted to be social media influencers. Certainly, I can understand the draw of this aspiration. I imagine they envision the role of a social media influencer as someone posting videos of themselves doing very cool things on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, and being so good at creating these videos that they go viral and eventually become monetized through advertisements and financial backers. However, I doubt these future influencers understand the technology and skills that would really benefit their endeavors and dreams for the future. As a baby boomer with more traditional views of work, I'm often tempted to poo poo and pronouncements of aspirations to be a social media influencer in much the same way an adult in my life poo pooed my aspiration to be a movie star many years ago. But in fact, I did star in my school play in the sixth grade and even won the drama award at the end of the year. It is true that I did not pursue a career in the entertainment industry, but when I think about it, my enjoyment of acting was perhaps part of the impetus for me to become a teacher. I kind of enjoy being in front of people, children and adults, and teaching, explaining, and telling them things they don't already know. So rather than raising a skeptical eyebrow when a student talks about wanting to be a social media influencer, we can just add this to the file cabinet of what we know about the student. Well, they feel they have something to say, something they want the world to know about them or the world around them. They enjoy working with digital tools. They have confidence to put themselves out there in the digital world. And what if we, as teachers, are enabled and empowered to facilitate their knowledge and skill building about the digital tools that will become the rocket ships into the future? What more could they accomplish? What more could they create and influence in the digital world? Of course, making this possible will take a lot of work and investment into schools as well as in institutions of higher education that produce teachers. It also takes societal investment. I'm sure that some of the young students who want to engage in the digital world as social media influencers do not lack imagination, but are somewhat limited in the tools they have, primarily the phones they cherish. Many don't have anything more sophisticated than that at home. This reality was brought home to us during the COVID pandemic when schools were closed and all of our teaching was online. Many schools had to scramble to ensure that students had computers at home and sufficient internet connections. The digital divide became very evident, and even with COVID relief funds, the success of teachers and learners depended on numerous societal and economic factors. In other words, the challenges young learners face in learning to read that are associated with societal and economic factors are also very real when developing the digital learning brain. However, your eighth letter provides valuable insight into how we could facilitate the development of the biliterate brains our children will need to successfully navigate our future reality. This is a steep order, a steep hill to climb, but I like a challenge and something to advocate for as someone who has dedicated a large portion of my life to children and education. I think what we need is an army of social media influencers to advocate for the ability of teachers to develop children with biliterate brains. Well, thank you, Maryanne. I look forward to reading your final letter, Reader Come Home. And until then, we remain your devoted readers, the teachers.